Good morning, podcast listeners. This is Ed Franklin with the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast. You can always contact me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com, and I welcome any criticism, or well, not too much criticism, but I welcome all the love. And if you have a guest that would like to be on my podcast, that'd be great. Or if you want to be on my podcast, you can contact me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com. And today we have a guest that's been on my podcast before, David Murray. I'll call him Dave the rest of the time, if that's okay.
Perfectly fine.
And Dave is with Safe Steps, and I've been kind of hinting to you all that I was going to be teaming up with a company that has a brilliant platform that I'm extremely excited and interested in. And we're going to partner a little bit and use my podcast to help them grow and to help get the word out of what they're doing. So, Dave, good morning. How you doing today?
Good morning, Ed. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on the podcast again.
So
you didn't kick me off. You welcomed me back. This is good. Okay.
Yeah. On our last podcast, Mark Pintar and you were explaining a little bit about what Safe Steps is, and we're going to dig into this a little bit more again, because I want to start where we're going to be doing some modules that talk about some of the things Safe Steps can help with. So first of all, probably just, you know what, let's do this. Give us a little bit of your background, if you don't mind, just a little bit of what you've been involved with in your life, because I think you have an interesting story.
Well, thanks. As it turns out, it is interesting. It's interesting to some people, probably more to others. And I started out, actually, my first career was in broadcast news. And I stumbled into that job. And when I say stumbled, it was stumble, fall, smack in the job, because I was on my way, at least in my mind, I was on my way to law school, finishing up a degree, and I needed some other time. And so I took an internship. I didn't graduate in communications. And I was not doing that, but something came up and said, "Oh, well, let's go do this." I fell in love with the profession, and it fit me, and I did that for nearly a decade.
Oh wow!
After that, we went through. I mean, I've been through it all. We saw a lot of stuff. I've been involved right at the ground level with a lot of national stories that people are familiar with, and saw a lot of people, saw a lot of things, as a result of the career.
Did you meet some interesting people right in that?
Oh, I met some very interesting people. Yeah. I've got lots of stories about, well, current senators and current people who have run for president of the United States.
Interesting.
Just as a factor being in Salt Lake City, Utah, who we dealt with, and not bad or good. Just you run across people who end up, becoming big nationally or internationally. And it's interesting just to see how they are, right, before maybe they get that exposure, and just how they go. You learn a lot about people in life. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I tell you, that would be a whole nother podcast to talk about how the media has changed, but we won't get off into that.
Well, you and I got to put that down, because as you can well imagine, I have some strong opinions. So
I'll bet you do. But we're going to stay focused today and talk about Safe Steps. So you and I have a mutual friend named Dave Smith.
Yes.
Who started this program years ago, and
right.
I met him through the chamber. So tell us a little bit, kind of a nutshell of what Safe Steps is about, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more in detail.
Okay, well, sounds good. I'll start out with this, is that, this is soft skills, human skills. This whole idea is nothing new. It's been around for over 100 years. They've studied this for over 100 years. There was an original study back in 1918 called the Mann Study, and it was about engineering and the practice of engineering and how you can make engineering more efficient. That led to another study. I believe it was I want to say Carnegie Mellon that continued that study. But what it found is that 80% of what is important in the job place is directly relatable to your mastery of human skills, soft skills, as they've been called for a long time. Right. We have our different take. That's why I'm saying human skills, and I can explain that. So knowing that there's been this understanding of this a long time, then Dave, myself, a lot of people go, we've all gone through the corporate world. We've all experienced life. We've all, have our gray hairs. And we're very aware of the importance of human skills and soft skills in the workplace and the job market. It's how I hired people. I didn't know it at the time, why I hired people. I didn't care about a piece of paper. What I cared about is how they were going to fit within our culture. What kind of a person were they? Did they have what again, not words I really understood at the time, emotional intelligence. But, luckily I had that gut. And so when we start talking about these things, like, oh yeah, I get the importance of these things. Safe Steps is a take on that. What the evolution of the company came from where Dave started with helping kids get through college. He wrote a book, getting kids through college without debt. That's where it started. In his work with families and teenagers, he recognized very early on a big chasm in communication in families, misunderstandings, all kinds of things. These basic things that some people may have a better idea of, maybe not. He saw it time and time again. He's like, wait a minute, there's something here. As he worked with families, as they started to communicate better, as they started to do maybe even time management better, with the intention of getting into college and doing these things because they had to focus and get these things done, lots of other areas of their lives improved.
Yeah.
And so that's how this started a long time ago. And so where we are now, fast forward, is, we see ourselves as a company where we're equipping teens and families with the vital human skills they're going to need for success, satisfaction, and work and life in the future.
And one of the things I like so much about this, or love about it, is that you're involving the parents too, right? It's a family communication thing. I've talked to my podcast recently about communication and how paramount communication is, right? In any relationship, even if you go to the store to buy something, you're communicating. And as these parents, I think it's advantageous for both the parents and the kids to learn how to communicate with each other and outside of that family too.
Absolutely.
I know Carson, my 14-year-old grandson, was just telling me that they're starting to push him on college thing, right? 14 years old, been to school 3 weeks now, 4 weeks. And I'm not saying college is not a great idea. There's certain skill. I would rather have my doctor go to college than learn at the butcher shop. But I don't know if it's the best thing for everybody. And we've had those discussions about how those human skills could help you identify what's best for you in your career in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
When I was working I was working for a large bottler, Pepsi Cola, and we had back in the day when everything was on paper, right? Your resumes. We had a human resources person. We called him personnel manager at the time. That the first thing they would do is take out all the white resumes and keep those and throw away anything that had a color on it, right? Any blue, any off-white. That's how she had to get through resumes. We get so many resumes. And how horrible is that, right? That she never, because you just don't have a time to sit down and talk to that person.
Right.
But I know that when I used to get resumes, I always wanted to meet those people, right? Because I would get a feeling for those people if they were going to be able to operate at a high level in our company. When I met Dave, he said, Ed, what do you look for in employees? I said, show up at 8 o'clock with your shoes tied. If you can do that, then I can help, I can train you to do anything. So that's kind of how Dave and I met. And then as I started this podcast, unknowingly, it was kind of the same platforms that I wanted to help younger people learn from my mistakes or from my knowledge that I picked up over the years of how they could operate at a higher level in the corporate world or in any job. It doesn't matter if it's corporate or their own business or anything like that. So I love this platform. And I know I pulled up some of the, so anyway, let's go back, talk about the modules that are developed already that people can take advantage of.
Well, so STEPS is an acronym for us, and there's a reason it's Safe Steps. And so STEPS broken down is self-esteem, time management, emotional intelligence, problem solving, and service stuff. So we have 5 pillars of human skills, and all the skills, whether it's building trust or empathy or finances, fall under one of those 5 of our pillars.
Right.
And so what we're doing, what we've created is, and how we see this is that it's I guess akin to karate or some of these other things where you need an introduction, you need a foundation, you need to understand some very basic things. And some people might see, go, well, that's very basic. I get that. But for a teenager, maybe today, maybe not. I've actually gone through my own kids who I think, everybody thinks their kids are pretty smart. My kids are very aware. When my daughter first went through this, she was shocked, actually. And I think I can use the word shocked when she was, and I talked about this on the last one, when one of the modules talked about the importance of a first impression and the importance of a handshake, and that people are sometimes judging you, good or bad. It's knowledge you now have so that when you interact with people, she didn't know that. I mean, she's around me, and I'm a very, I guess, traditional in the sense where I meet somebody, I shake their hand, I still use sir and ma'am, and she didn't know that. And so
Right.
I didn't take the time to tell her. So even though it's obvious to me and it's very basic to me, I didn't. And so that's where we're starting with a lot of these where we're starting the modules in this level 1, which is what we want them to do is to watch a 2 to 8 minute video that we've produced talking about a specific narrow skill or topic. And then we do a knowledge check using a platform, 4 to 6 questions, not arduous. We're talking, this is in the idea of micro learning, just to make sure that they understand the concept, that not a test per se, do you understand what we're talking about? And then after that, we have guided questions for parents and kids to engage, because we know that it's one thing to learn it, to understand it, but it's an entirely different thing to start practicing it, start talking to parents, start talking to peers, start talking to guardians, just about what these things are. Most people are like, "Ow, I don't need it," but we think we've done it in ways that it's appealing. We've had great response from kids. We've had kids go, "Oh, this is just stupid." We have kids go, "Okay, this is interesting. Okay, it doesn't feel like we're talking down to them. We're not setting it up like that. Kids are people, and they're amazing, have an amazing view of the world. We're trying to engage that and to say, hey, this is also part of this. We're going to help you. And then also give perhaps a vehicle for parents to engage their kids in a different way. And so as a result, we've seen some really good impact. We've seen stress reduction, some anxiety reduction, some improved decision-making, some, we'd say improved critical thinking, and then some understanding of other people. Right. And that's been made us very happy that this is starting to work. So,
well, I think what's interesting I think you get to know your kids when you communicate at a different level like this. Like, it's not about, feeding the dog or putting the dishes away, and you're actually starting to have an intellectual discussion with your kids. I had I don't know, she's a life coach person on a while back, and she was talking about, she worked for the county and she had access to all these jobs that were coming available and what they paid and this and that. And her job was to go out to these places and give this information to society, right? So they could find the jobs and where the hot spots are and this and that. However, her son wanted to do something different. And instead of taking that to her, they communicated, and she encouraged him to go down a path that was definitely not in the paperwork that she was doing as a social worker. And I said, isn't that funny that you didn't think, she encouraged her son to do something completely outside of the box because she knew him. And this is what I think this communication could help the parents with, is getting to know what their kids are really interested in. Something else that you guys talked about in the past, which I thought was fascinating, is, like you, I have kids that participated in sports activities, things outside, and we spent thousands of dollars for our kids, mostly because I have 700 kids, but we spent thousands of dollars on sports and equipment and all these things. And I think they learned a lot, team building and things like that, but we never really spent any money or personal investment in their emotional health, teaching them about money, teaching them about all these seemingly simple things that we kick our kids out of the house and they don't know anything about.
Right. Well,
so I think
talking to you over time, I think what I've learned about you and how you interact with your kids, and I think one of the things that becomes apparent when you start to do the apparent, not as an apparent, when you start to do this, is that you start to see your kids, and maybe
Yes.
you do anyway, but it's that seeing them, not just seeing as a kids. To your point, like, oh yeah, do this, fit in here, go to this thing. It's like, no, I'm seeing you now as a human being. You have thoughts independent of me. You have ideas independent of me. You have feelings independent of me. Just like you and I would interact as adults. When you start interacting with your kids on that in that way, it changes the paradigm.
Oh, 100%. And I think that's the great thing about the kids getting older. Now, I think I told you my dad passed away when I was 19, and I got a real opportunity to meet my mom as a person, right? She wasn't working at the time. I worked nights. So we had a lot of these really in-depth conversations. And I got to know her as a person. I always thought that was one of the most important things that ever happened. And I think vice versa, I think that was good for her too. I think she got to know me as a man, or as a young man.
Mhm.
And yes, I think Safe Steps definitely lends itself to that relationship building too. Outside of the basics of it, I think it engages parents and kids into a conversation situation where they probably wouldn't have it without something like this.
That's right.
Listening
Well,
to
and
Simon,
I know Dave's told you this. I mean, Dave has, he's seen this time and time again, because
yeah,
he was that person in the middle of parents and kids, helping them, structure and plan for college, and trying to figuring out how to do it. And so he spent hours and hours and hours and hours in seeing that conversation. And he would say, yeah, absolutely, it's the same thing, and back it up, which is what I think kind of spurred this whole thing of like, look, there's this beautiful dynamic that starts to take place when you have an opportunity to engage your kids, and vice versa, in maybe a slightly different way.
I think sometimes as parents, as people, period, when I look back to when I was 18 years old, I did not do exactly what my parents wanted me to do. Right?
Shocking.
None of us did. I know, shocking, isn't it? And I don't know why us parents think that our kids are going to do it too. But I recognize that when the kids were turning 18 and 19 and 20, that they were going to do some things that not necessarily that I was unhappy with, just wasn't my plan for them. Like I look at my kids' personality and say, well, that you'd probably fit better over here. Maybe. I mean, if they're not engaged in that, or if they don't enjoy that, then they're not going to fit better in there. It's not what I think, it's what they're capable of and what their desires are and things like that. So, but back to when your kids start getting, it is awesome when your kids start getting older and you can talk to them like peers,
Mhm.
and the older they get, the less the age gap seems to shrink down, because they start understanding what you were about as a parent, because they're parents now, and vice versa. So I think that's important. So um, I'm just going to mention a couple of these modules that we had, that you guys developed. And one of them, we talk about social media, right? Talk about, I remember my daughter doing something on social media that wasn't inappropriate. It just wasn't real appropriate for work. And I had called her and said, you might want to just take that off there, right? This stuff's living forever. It's going to be around forever. And especially for her, she wants to be in politics. She better really watch what she puts on. And so we know that kids are communicating through social media now, and of course, as parents, we think some of it's inappropriate. They think it's okay. It's just what's going on these days. But employers are going to be looking at that, right? We need to help our children, our youth, with what they're putting on social media and how to use it in a positive manner.
Mhm.
Right. So I know that's one of the modules that you guys have.
It is, and it's it's one of those that I can see ever evolving as our relationship with social media changes.
Yeah.
From adults and kids, and what the platforms are doing, what they're not doing, the new platforms that come up. It's not just Facebook and Instagram. It's TikTok. It's Reddit. It's Discord. It's Twitch. I mean, there are all these different ways of communication going on, and kids will say, "Yeah, I know. Yeah, of course I know," but they're also, like, I have a 17 and 20-year-old. They were the first generation to grow up almost exclusively, in this, having phones at the ready, and having this communication outside the house always and omnipresent. Yeah, I've seen the pitfalls. I mean, it's good, it's bad. I've seen good things. I've seen really bad things. And so it's, we start the basic conversation around social media because you have to. do I see it as something that is always going to change? Absolutely.
I agree.
And this is something that all of us need to just come to terms with about our relationship with social media. We as
Well, it's
adults,
going to change, and it's changing rapidly. I mean,
Rapidly.
it's not even like, us being about the same age and growing up, things took like a lifetime, right? 15 years to change a paradigm. It's taken 15 minutes now.
Yeah.
I had somebody recommend to me that I get on TikTok to promote my podcast, just because they were quick videos and I could do some fun stuff with them. And so I got the app, and now I get mail every day that shows TikTok, and kids aren't getting it. I got news for you with the inappropriate things, right? But I look at now, looking back, of course, I had to explain to my grandson the other day that we couldn't text and things like that, right, when we were kids.
Mhm.
The first phone I ever got was from my oldest daughter. She was left at a high school after a basketball game. Thank God a teacher stayed with her, and I bought her a phone so she could let me know when she was getting close. And that's kind of how we always viewed social media on our end anyway, as parents.
Right.
And it's hard for him to understand we didn't have anything like this when we were kids, right? Yeah, we did stuff like walk places, things like that.
Right. Yeah. Well,
I think social media is amazing, right? I have more friends in high school than I ever had in high school on Facebook. I communicate different things. I put a positive message out every morning on Facebook, every morning, 363 days a year, probably. And if I don't do it, somebody calls me or texts me and asks me if I'm okay, right? So I'm so consistent at it. But I use it as a very positive, and of course, advertising and things like that for business. But yeah, that's important. I mean, what these kids are putting out and it doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't. And I mean, and they are going to be asking the question. This is a conversation I have with my kids, and I think this is the whole point of doing these modules, is to start those conversations, and also to start introducing them to perhaps some information they didn't know, right? About how perhaps their data is being used. So, the data privacy and things like that maybe they're not aware of how they are, maybe they are, about what that means about having their digital identity sort of out there and perhaps stolen. I mean,
but you can use it to your advantage too.
You can, no, and that's what I'm saying. So, I mean, they'll see it inappropriate to say, well, yeah, but I can tell you right now, and I'm sure you've seen on TikTok, it used to be, hey, I want to become this, I want to become this. Influencer is what a lot of kids want to become. And good or bad, they do. Because why? They see a lot of people, and perhaps it's a whole, just a whole smoke and mirrors thing, making a lot of money. I will tell you, as somebody who was also in the marketing space for a long, long time, there are people making a lot of money.
Yeah.
Like legitimately making a lot of money. And getting to have fun and do shoots with their friends and do all the stuff. And so they see it as like, well, I like doing that. And so inappropriate becomes sometimes outlandish sells. And if I can make money, who cares? So that's what I'm saying. There are these complex conversations that come out of just saying, okay, here's where we are right now. Here's why you need to think about these things, or you should be aware of these things.
Sure.
How do you want to interact with social media, and what makes you comfortable? Those kinds of things. That's the whole point of this, is to start those conversations.
Are you an iPhone user?
I am.
So there was an emergency update yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I told my grandson to make sure he did that. And he says, why? I said, well, I had to get down to the last answer, which is because it's my phone and I told you to do it, right? So I explained it to him later that there was some spyware thing like that. Yeah. So something else for kids to understand that.
Right. Well, you appreciate, my mom actually texted me and said, hey, did you know that there's
yes. So I texted all the people that I pay for their phone and said, hey, I'll take your phone. Something else, I just pulled up another module that's about decision making, intro to decision making.
Right.
I can tell you, and this is an obvious statement, but maybe not for a 19-year-old, is that I make decisions much differently than I used to, right? 30 years ago. I have different information now. I'm more patient. I drive my wife crazy if I want to buy a car or a motorcycle. In the past, I'd take forever because I'm very patient and I'm asking the right questions. I'm learning, I'm educating myself, things like that. We don't
deliberate would be a word, right?
Yes. We don't always have that option, of course, in business and things. Sometimes we have to make decisions very quickly, children, things like that.
Right.
So decision making, how do you, when your kids are coming up, I get a lot of texts from my kids, my older kids especially, and say, hey, what do you think about this? And most of the time, and I'm going to answer my own question, but I want your 2 cents.
Okay.
Is I'll say, what would you tell your daughter to do if she was asking you the same question, or your son?
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell her to do? Because you'll never give your kids bad information, I hope, right? You'd always tell them to do what's in their best interest, or in the people's best interest around them. And I think when you change that perspective for them, because I think we'll make different decisions for ourselves versus our kids or grandkids at times.
Mm-hmm.
So I always said that's kind of my advice to my kids all the time, and they kind of know it now. And then we'll talk it out and come up with something. So your kids are right into that area where they obviously have made decisions in their life, but now they're making those adult decisions.
More adult decisions, right? And
Yeah.
and and that's why in our kind of our decision 101 modules, our intention is to introduce a framework that maybe you did not, maybe some things to ask yourself. Okay, how are you approaching this decision? Are you even making any considerations? Are you using your gut? And to understand that there are some basic principles to decision making, good, bad, otherwise. Again, these are things that have been studied. These are things that have been looked at and saying, okay, this process of decision making helps the individual sort through. It doesn't determine whether it's a good or a bad decision. It just helps you get to a more thought out decision. And that's that with our 101 our 101 modules, that's what we're really trying to do, is to lay that foundation. Like, how do you even make a decision? Like, when you decide to do this, are you at all even considering ramifications? And it's something I've noticed, again, it's anecdotal. I've noticed with my kids, as they've gotten a bit older, the decisions and how they consider these things, they're starting to think about more long-term or long tail kinds of things.
Yeah.
Does that mean they make the decisions I hope they make? Not always. As a parent, no, not always. And that's sort of that then becomes that, how do you interact with your kids? And the whole goal for this, and then, for me as a parent, but this is to also help parents, like, just give them a couple of things. Maybe we all know that, but sometimes we need a reminder of, like, oh, that's right. Those are good questions to ask ourselves when we're talking about this and how you're going about this. And so that's decision making is obviously essential to all of this. And, we say, oh, we want to make good decisions. And then you and I both know, sometimes you set out to make what you think is a good decision, ends up being a bad decision, right? That's what wisdom and the experience teaches you. So even sometimes when you go through those processes of trying to make the best decision possible, it doesn't necessarily mean it ends up well.
Right.
But you need a set of tools at the ready to where you have at least an ability to kind of sort through what might be a good idea and what might not be a good idea, and why. This is your ability. You need tools to help sift through. And if you don't have them, it's hard to kind of find the I guess the diamond, or the diamond in the rough. If you don't know what you're looking for, you don't know how to even look at it, you're not going to find it. But if you at least understand what you're looking for, you'll do better by that decision. It might not work out in your favor. This goes into emotional intelligence and being able to deal with challenges, or when things don't go your way, and that all becomes part of that emotional intelligence part of what this is because life doesn't always go your way. In fact, it doesn't go your way a lot of times sometimes.
Right.
And so, or people, or this, or how you interact with other people, it doesn't, you might make a decision, for example, to do something. Well, that doesn't preclude somebody from just being I'll give you something I saw again. So, like, okay, you make a decision to do something, and then you're out and you're confronted with somebody who is just behaving erratically. How do you decide to do that? Do you decide to engage them? Do you have the emotional intelligence to say, just, they're calling me names and I'm just going to let it go in one ear and out the other? Because I understand that what could happen with this is that lots of bad things could happen. I could stand my ground. I could say, what are you talking about? Or I could say whatever and just let it roll off. that becomes an emotional intelligence thing, and we see it often. I mean, I hate to say that, the whole notion of Karen. I think Brad is the male thing, but the
Oh,
Karen.
yes.
And I look at, I'm appalled, probably along with everybody else, going, I can't believe people behave like that. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, you can also choose to not engage them either. You can also choose to walk you there and to say, you're nuts. Now, sometimes that doesn't always work. And this is where making decisions about outcome, but also having emotional intelligence in order to deal with the real life in front of you plays a part. And if you practice, this is where it all comes back to. If you start to practice these things when you're a teenager, if you start to go through these little scenarios and you start to talk to your parents about what they did when they did this, it's practice. This is not something you just know off the top of your head. This is something that you develop over time. It's skills, human skills it's a lifelong practice. And here's the thing, if you don't use them, they get rusty.
Yeah.
And that's part of what this is all about, is that this is something that you don't learn once and you walk away from. This is something where you say, you know what, I'm going to start doing this, and I'm going to start engaging and learning and mastering human skills. And we see a lot of people doing it, and a lot of people do it on mindfulness and meditation, and that's all part of the same family of things of like, are you aware of your emotions? Are you aware of this? Why? Because we understand the value of that. I think as a society, we see this in parts. The people who exercise and practice these things over and over and over again do better when shit goes south. Pardon me, friend. Because they've practiced, and now it becomes an automatic behavior.
Well, I
You've
think
seen it in sports. Sports is a good, you've seen, you learn and learn and learn. It's muscle memory.
Well, actually, sports is a really good metaphor to what I've learned to look for good things in people. I've learned to look at their point of view and try to understand it. And also understand that whether I understand it or not, it's their point of view and I have my point of view, right? Now, you could talk about gun laws. You could talk about sports teams. Gary B was on, I was watching him yesterday he was talking about loyalty, how nobody's loyal. So I'm a Cowboys fan, and I'll probably just lose listeners from that, but I know they haven't won anything in 100 years, but I'm still a Cowboys fan because I'm loyal to the Cowboys, right? I have their jerseys, I have those things, and I'll still rep, the Cowboys. And I think that my kids would tell you that I'm much more open-minded than I used to be. Not permissive to things, but at least trying to understand what other people's point of views are. I find that if I look for something good in somebody, and if I'm confronted, I tend to not back down, but I understand their point of view a little bit better, and I can accept what's going on. So, last night yesterday, the state of California, and I'm going to get into politics. I got another module to talk about. We just had, our governor did not get recalled, right? So it's funny that the other side, it's always somebody cheated, right? So we look at the politics, we go, well, nobody gets elected anymore. They just cheat better than the other team. Now, we know that's ridiculous, right? But it's what social media hasn't helped with this. So this is where we have to be careful of what we're putting out there too, for people that are younger. Sometimes it's better just not to say anything, right? Our parents would have told us that when we were kids. And I did not learn that for a long time. I would say something all the time, and it usually was not favorable to the person listening. Probably lost some friends that way, maybe a job or two too, by the way. But sometimes you just have to let things, go. So that's kind of back to that, just kind of telling kids to be a little bit more patient. You don't have to make a decision in 5 minutes. Take 5 hours if you have to. It's the old thing where I'd get a nasty email and I'd sit down at the computer and start banging on the keys and then push my computer away and go, I'll answer it tomorrow, because I'll be better prepared to answer that in a civil way tomorrow.
Right. I mean, I've learned through my life that when things have really bothered me, I step back, I write what I'm going to write, and I give it a day. And then I say, and that's just me, because I've learned through experience, bad and good, that I've got to come back to that thing, because emotion does weird things. And sometimes it gets me out of, I guess, being a little bit more logical, a little more reasonable. And it's been a good it's been good for me to like look, okay, I'll look at it tomorrow, and if I feel the same way, okay, then obviously, okay, then I'm okay with this, because I just know the damage that can be done when if I want to engage, and that's just me. A lot of people don't even give it that a day. They don't even give it a minute. They'll say, I'm just going to say what I say and let the chips fall where they may.
That's why everybody needs safe steps, right? Because we're going to help them get that patience, get better at that, because I'm with you 100%. Last thing we'll talk about on this, and then we're of course going to do some modules and send those out later, but time management, yes. Huge deal to some of my kids. Let me rephrase that. Huge deal to me with some of my kids, time management. Very important. Obviously, we only have 24 hours in a day. What you do with those 24 hours is important, and what you spend talking about social media. I mean, we have what averages of people are on social media 5, 6, 7 hours a day right now. That's a whole day's worth of work for a lot of people. So what do you guys talk about on time management? What's the goal of time management?
The goal is to this also goes to part of planning too, at least on the again, time management 101 is about what does that really mean, and that which we all sort of, I understand the concept of like, oh, time management, I just manage my time well. Okay, it's also understanding, or introducing them to the concepts of like, okay, you have all these things that you want to do and you're committed to do. Right. Are you looking at it? Do I have enough time to give to each of these things? Are you trying to do too much? Are you then, with the things you do have that you've committed to, are you managing? Okay. And this is very simple. Are you managing the moments you have to work on the things that you have to get done versus the things you want to do? Yes. So it gets into conversations of the have, the want. This could also be a conversation a little bit, if a parent suspects their kid, and I know this is a thing, of ADHD, of kids who might not have a great relationship with time, where they are thinking of all kinds of things. It might help them try and sort through some of that stuff to say, okay, well, in order to get these things done, as maybe overwhelming as it might seem, we've got to figure out how we can block these things off. So there's lots of principles on how you can carve down a day, or carve down an assignment, or carve down a thing to do it in bite sizes. This is me personally, but I think it's appealing, or it's applicable to what we do in time management. I read something, I don't know, a couple years ago, where it says, make a list of 6 things you want to get done that day. 6. That's it. 6 things that you need to do that day. If you do those 6 every day, you'll be shocked at the outcome. I tended to be a person of like multiple lists, and I got to do all these things and do all the stuff. And me personally, I got overwhelmed in all of the stuff, wanting to do all the things. Yeah. So for me, that tool was helping identify what was important in my day and just focusing on that. And that being the goal, meaning like, okay, I know there's a tendency to want to go do this or want to go do this. So going back to our time management 101, there are those kinds of introductions to skills like, okay, what tools exist right now? What rules of thumb that the experts have agreed on are really good rules of thumb in order to go through a day. In the case of a high school student who might be involved in sports, who has classes, who has perhaps a job, there are all these things and all these demands on their time. Add to that their want or their desire to be on social media. They're wanting to engage with their friends. How are you managing all of those demands on your time and having that conversation? Some kids just probably naturally do it because maybe it's been patterned in their household of like, okay, well, you do basically, okay, you push those things to a side, you focus on these main things. How do you even identify what's important? And that also becomes part of the conversation. Time management is also identifying what's important. Sure. And understanding that time is the one thing is probably the most valuable to you. And as I get older, it's definitely something I consider a lot more than I used to consider. It's like, oh, we got all the time in the world. Well, it's also, in time management, we just want kids to understand that they've got to start figuring out how to appropriate, because their time is valuable. What they do is valuable to them. And so they should be doing the things that are most valuable to them. Well, how do they do that? You know, how do you do that if you want to do all these things and you know you don't have the time? So how do you start ordering that of importance? And how do you manage through that? And what kinds of, what kinds of basic things can you do? Is it setting an alarm on your phone every whatever it is based upon what you're doing? Say, okay, now it's time to move on to the other thing. Maybe if you're doing homework. Again, we're introducing.
It's funny you said that, because I actually do that on my phone.
You do that?
I
Yeah.
still do it today.
Yeah.
I still do that because I became very good at compartmentalizing my time, right?
Mhm.
This hour is just for this, nothing else, because I'm the guy, right? And I see shiny things and now I'm distracted, right? Or a squirrel or something. But I had to make sure that I was, not procrastinating and minimizing the distractions. I'm reading some of your things here, controlling the clutter. I'm a big one for that. I know that if my garage is neat, life is much better. And that's silly as that sounds.
It doesn't sound silly.
It's usually where I go when it's time for me to get organized. I go out and make sure everything in my garage is the way I want it and where it's at.
Right.
And then go room to room if I have to. But no, this is all amazing stuff. And this is why I wanted to team up with you guys. I think we're going to be, quite successful getting this out to the corporate world as a supplemental education for parents. I think the school districts do a fine job at the things they're good at. And hopefully this can be a supplement to what they're doing and get kids and parents to start communicating better than maybe they have been, and not just sticking them into a sport. Not that all parents do that, but it's putting them getting them distracted. I think a lot of times with that ADHD, I think the parent's goal is to get them burned out on something that's physical, right? Does that make any sense?
No,
Get
that makes
their energy
sense.
levels, let them run around the park like a puppy or something. And
well, it's just like taking a dog for a walk at night. Like,
Yeah.
okay, great. Now they'll sleep. No, and I do get that. And I mean, at the end of the day, this is all about starting right? So starting a foundation, because it's not just this is neat to have. This is, the science of this. This is the largest institutions in the world have now been studying this. And again, for 100 years, but now in the last 20 years, it's all picked up and they're really going, this is really important. Like, in fact, actually, this is the most important thing you start to master as just a human being, because it's going to impact everything you do. So you start now, start teens, and then this becomes a lifelong process. As I said, it's not something you stop. Ideally, you're doing this all the time. Even as adults, you're practicing these kinds of things and getting better and honing these things. And why? Because it benefits you. It's going to benefit you in work and life. They know that. The reason that it hasn't been taught in large part is because it's really hard to study and track. We like schools where you do tests, you identify that you know a lot of things and you move on. This is one of the things you identify, you know it, but you really don't know the impact of it because it's a practice. And it's like an internship of life in many ways. You learn this over a period of time, and that becomes a hard trackable thing. And so it's not something that they do because they can't score it as easily.
Something that you just said sparked an interest in me. There's no doubt there's kids with learning disabilities. There's no doubt in my mind that out of 30 kids in a classroom, 26 of them probably think differently than the other 4, right? I mean, it's just life, right? I was one of these guys. If you took me to a factory and showed me what I was selling, no problem. If you sat me in a classroom trying to teach me, we're going to have a problem, right? I couldn't keep my thought. And this is really lends to that, where you really start to understand yourself and how you learn things, and it makes you a better learner too. Just that communication. I know that I had gone to a class about audible learners and kinesthetic learners and things like that. And when I came back, it was on a business trip, and when I came back, one of my daughters, I used to say, look at me when I'm talking, and she would never look at me because I knew if she looked at me, she's an audible learner. I would distract her, right?
Right.
If she saw whether I was angry or not, she was better off looking away and listening to me, and she would pick it up better. So I think, and on top of everything Safe Steps is doing, it also lends itself to letting people learn at their own pace and at their own way, right?
Mhm.
Through communication.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that is,
Dave,
I mean, yeah, no, I mean, I think sorry, you hit it on the head. I think that's exactly right. I think we're realizing that in education is that, we can look back about the history of the last 150 years of why we learn the way we learn, putting people in rooms and saying, here's all this information, we're going to put it in. I mean, there's all kinds of theories and philosophies about that. At the end of the day, what we're coming to is that it's all about competency-based learning. It's all about this self-navigated learning, even in the hard skills spaces.
And I think the education system is still looking for conformity, and social media is exactly not that. So what
Exactly
kids are
not that.
getting is complete reverse of what. Look, all my kids learned differently. Some of them got better grades. They all went same household, blah 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 blah. And they're all different levels now. I think, and it's like I said, this could be a whole nother podcast. Inclusion is a big deal, right? We're including the top 20% and saying this is what you should do, and we're going to follow, and we're going to give you all these things, and we're kind of excluding the lower 80%. They're not even lower. It's just they're just not the 20%, right? And how many times, and if you ever meet Matthew, which you probably will, he kind of has his finger on this button because he knows how different it was for him to learn when he was a kid versus how he's doing now and how he can assimilate information now. Very different things. So listen, we're going to be talking a lot about Safe Steps in the near future. We're going to be doing these modules, probably 15 or 20-minute modules coming up. We're going to be recording those. And if anybody that's listening to this wants to go to the website, it's thesafesteps.com. Remember, thesafesteps.com. It's a good website. It's way better than it was. I was messing with you last time.
Yes,
and you can kind of go in and see what we're trying to accomplish, and you're going to see a lot more of this in the future. And we're out there just trying to help that youth. So, and parents, it's not just for the kids; it's for the parents too, to learn how to communicate with their children.
Absolutely. Ed, thank you very much for the time. It was a pleasure last time. Definitely a pleasure this time. I look forward to it. And then when you want me, when we want to talk media, completely not Safe Steps, when we want to do that podcast, let's do that.
I want to do that. I want to, we're going to get to know each other way better than we probably want to over these next few months with these modules, but I'm excited to hear some of those stories and to talk about that. Listen, if I can learn something, I'm in, if I can learn something new. And this is what I always tell people, that everybody can teach me something. Now, I don't know everything, obviously. And the older I get, it seems less I know, because I'm learning stuff every day that I'm like, really? I didn't even know. I just told you I didn't even know what Discord was. So
you and me both.
So Ed Franklin.NoLimits podcast, edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com if you want to contact me, and www.thesafesteps.com to learn more about this. Stay tuned for more modules. Stay tuned for more information. And Dave, thanks again for being on, and we're going to see you very shortly. So, but hang on a second, I'm going to stop the recording and then we'll go. So, podcast listeners, keep sharing, keep listening, and get ready. There's a lot more.